us seeking clinical help for, you can trace its root to some social inequity. So let's recognize that one of the most important clinical contributions we can make is to engage people in the struggle and in the fight for their own justice. We have an opportunity when it comes to Latino communities right now. The demography is on our side. Okay, we know that we are among the largest and fastest growing populations within the country. In fact, by 2050, it's projected that we will represent 30% of the US population. There's a big need right now for counter narratives. We're so used to being minoritized, right? We are a minority population. We are an oppressed population. While there may be some truth to that oppression, the side of the story that's not being told is the power that we have right now. Not just in our numbers, our youth, and our opportunities right now. We have very real challenges. I don't need to minimize that for a moment. I couldn't be more aware of these challenges. But there is an opportunity right now. And one of the tasks we have as social workers, I think, is to create counter stories, counter narratives to the dominant story that's out there. The headline is always about how poorly we're fared. And I think we need to shift that headline to, we do have power, there is an opportunity here, you need to get involved, you need to get engaged.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Dr. Suzanne Kristie, who's an associate professor at the University of Houston Graduate School of Social Work. And she is one of our political social work scholars. Dr. Shannon is also someone who's done a lot of work, and she's also the Coalition for Policy, Education, and Practice Scholar. It's a coalition that has been brought together of social work organizations so that we can begin looking at what our schools are doing, what they're doing in terms of policy, education, and policy practice. And so I'm going to let Dr. Kristie, I'll give a few remarks.
Thank you, Charles. Good morning. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm really excited to get to talk about civic engagement during the Trump era and moving forward. I'm going to talk today from really two perspectives. One is that, as Charles mentioned, really much of what I do is focus on researching policy practice and civic engagement, both among social workers and young people. So I'm going to talk a lot from a research perspective today, what we know about civic engagement among social workers. And then I also teach and train policy practitioners in the Texas context. And I particularly want to make a point about that. There was an article that came out in the Texas Tribune in November, right after the election, that talked about how really what's going on in Texas is a good preview for how politics are likely to work under a unified Republican government in D.C. And so there's a lot that we've seen, a lot of things that may be a little surprising about how the unified government works that I want to bring to the table as we move forward from my experience in Texas. So in Texas, in addition to teaching policy courses and researching, I also coordinate several political internship programs, including a block placement where I have 15 students right now in the Texas legislature, living, eating, breathing politics, law politics in the Texas legislature. So I'll come back to that in a little bit. But I want to situate our discussion really is sharing some key findings from some national surveys that I've done both in 2012 and 2016, immediately following the presidential election, looking at about 1,000 students around the country, what their political participation looks like, so that when we're talking about how to promote civic engagement among social workers, that we have a sense of where our students are today. So first of all, our students are interested in politics, both in 2012 and 2016. 85% of students in my surveys reported being somewhat or very interested in politics. Over 80% watched the presidential debate. Over 80% do want to acknowledge there's some self-selection. If you're not interested in politics at all, you might not fill out the survey. But I'm going to talk about, so even if you are looking at our most engaged folks, these are students who showed pretty consistently what we see in national surveys of social workers generally, very high rates of voting in presidential elections. So we've got a very engaged social workers. These rates drop substantially when we start talking about down ballot races. So we go from 95% of their survey saying, oh, I voted for president, to about 60% voting for U.S. representative and other down ballot races. So even among very engaged social workers, we see a big drop there. Another thing that I want to emphasize is that I think a lot of times we talk about political engagement and we focus on voting. So we see this in political science, literature, and other areas. The way we talk, we say, you gotta go vote, you gotta go vote. Because making a difference and influencing policy does involve electing responsive representatives to office, but it also involves continuing pressure on them to adopt or reject policy stances once they're in office, right? If we're not doing that, so we've got somebody who's in office who you like, you don't like, but then what, right? And if they're not feeling pressure from us, and continued pressure from us, they're not going to be responsive to us. So I think it's critical that we're making sure that social workers are engaged much beyond the ballot box. And so what we've seen in research is that engagement is commonly, students are engaged in following and paying attention to political news. Over 90% of students in surveys follow news and research campus stances. Now, how much, how frequently they did this varied, but over 90% said they did this at some point in 2016. But then when we move to expressing or acting on reviews publicly, it drops off. So about 2/3 of those students expressed political views online in some form in 2016, so that may have just been a little post on Facebook. We could have been more. But then only about 1/3 of students engaged in what I consider active and committed public-facing political action. So only about 1/3 protested or marched, demonstrated any sort of candidate support, a button, a sticker, a sign, anything, I see students with their Bernie Sanders or their Clinton, whatever stickers on their laptop. That was just about 1/4 of these students. Only about 1/3 attended any sort of political event or candidate or contacted an official who represents the community. And that one I specifically wanted, we talk a lot about that calling representatives, but only about 1/3 of these students did that. And less than 20% worked or volunteered for a candidate or political party. So when I look at this data, I see a lot of room for opportunity, a lot of places that we could be involved. But I also want to say this. Social students do all of these activities at a far greater rate than their other millennial counterparts. Okay? So these numbers to me, these are going to be desired, and then I stop and I look at the research and what we know about other young people. And we have an opportunity here with students who are doing more and more present in these conversations. Then I want to talk a minute too about what we look at research and what's happening in our classrooms. So as Charles mentioned, I'm doing some research as part of the Coalition for Policy Education and Practice Fellow doing research with the state policy education and social work. We're still in the process of collecting that data, so we don't have all of that, but I want to share a little bit about what we do now. So first of all, for those of you who may not be familiar with this, so social work education has 9 competencies that all of our students must achieve, and one of these required ones is policy practice. So policy practice is, one of the top 9 things we need to make sure that our students are learning. But the forms that these take, that policy education takes very substantially across programs. We have some programs where there's a little bit of policy tied into a class that covers other content, and there's other programs where students may have 3 dedicated policy classes. So of course, their 2-year curriculum in MSW or in their bachelor's program. Some programs are emphasizing let's learn about current policies, let's learn about affordable care and Medicaid, or putting them in historical context. And other schools are spending less time on scales, on advocacy scales, on analysis. So again, students aren't getting the same thing. It's very great across the country. What also varies is Charles mentioned Shannon Lane before. Shannon and I did some research where we surveyed field directors across the country. And what we found is that we also vary widely in terms of field opportunities for students to learn to engage in policy. And what we know around civic engagement research is this experiential opportunities that build political engagement skills. So at about 50% of programs in this country, some, maybe one or two, some BSW or founded in MSW foundation students have access to policy practice responsibilities. So that means that 50% of programs where there's not a single student getting exposure to that in the field. And very few of these experiences, even at schools that do have policy practice responsibilities, involve exposure to elected officials. So our students do not interact with elected officials. In the advocacy organizations, grassroots, but they're not in contact necessarily with elected officials. Field instructors talk about this, or field directors talk about this, saying there are challenges to field-based policy opportunities that I think we need to think about as a profession. Issues around lack of professional social work supervision, but also that students see their field, because students don't think this is as important as their clinical training. Why should I want to be a clinical social worker, or should I spend some time exposed to policy in my field? And then something else that folks talk about is the concerns of distance from policy places. They say, well, we're nowhere near Washington, D.C., we're nowhere near our state capital. And one thing that Charles mentioned, want to maybe address today is involvement at the state and local level. Well, there is policy happening everywhere. In your town, municipalities, in town councils, in county commissions, etc. But we're not seeing those as policy options for our students. So we keep focusing on national level policy and not what's happening in state and local areas, then we're not helping our students gain those skills to be able to impact policy across levels. But CSWA and the Plan for Policy Education Practice have really done a lot of work in the last year through a policy practice and field education initiative to try to respond to some of these challenges. So I'm very hopeful about the opportunities we have moving forward in that regard. And the last thing I want to, let's come back to the political engagement data that I talked about in the beginning. Initially, this is what we're seeing in programs. So when I did my surveys of students across the country to see what they were doing, I also asked both students about what was going on in their programs, and in 2012, I asked administrators, deans, directors, what they were doing. So the majority of our students, over 60%, say in both 2012 and 2016 that their programs encourage them to vote, register to vote, and pay attention to election-related issues and news. But just 1/4 of programs sponsored or offered voter registration drive. So programs are saying, go vote, go register to vote, but we're not creating opportunities close by for students to do that. Fewer than half of our students report being encouraged to examine election issues deeply or to register others to vote. So they're saying, well, we weren't encouraged to go more deeply into issues, and we weren't encouraged also to do some of what social work talks about, empowering meaningful participation among vulnerable populations, helping other people to be able to have access. 1/3 of administrators in 2012 reported that their programs sponsored or offered discussions around election issues outside of class. So in 2/3 of our programs, there's nothing happening around election issues, discussion of policy outside class. Again, discussion, being exposed to issues is where students want to be confident to engage in political action. One of the data I want to mention is that how do we influence who is elected, who makes these decisions? We need to be out there volunteering and working on campaigns. Less than 1/4 of our students reported that they were encouraged by the programs to volunteer for a local, state, or federal election campaign. And I don't mean this in a partisan way. I mean, at all, as we said, something that is important for you to do is to consider volunteering for a local campaign. So again, I want to just kind of wrap up here, but listen, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to really build and strengthen what we're doing around education, both in our core explicit curriculum and what we do outside of the classroom. What kinds of opportunities are we present so that we can help build civic engagement. There's a lot we know from civic engagement research. I think we need to bring it into social work about how we can create programs in our create opportunities in the classroom to strengthen political engagement and really move forward in our students and our future professionals' ability to impact.
Thank you. Brian, who is a veteran White House correspondent. This is the 4th president that she's been a correspondent under. And I mean, we can spend the rest of this conversation just listening to her. But before our next presenter, Jason Green, I'm going to ask former Congressman Adolphus Towns, Ed Towns, to come up and say a few words and introduce our moderator. Let's get it.
Good morning. Good morning. Let me say that I am excited about all of this. You know, I served in the Congress for 30 years. And of course, we started the social work caucus and we started Chris. And let me just say to you, why I think it's important sometimes to share why you were so concerned. I checked, and these are not, and I found out that we had more undertakers in the Congress than social workers. And so I felt that it's time to do something. Anytime you have more undertakers than you have social workers. And then, of course, as a result, you know, we put forth an effort to start trying to recruit. Every commencement that I attended, I indicated the fact I was there to recruit social workers to get involved in the political process. And of course, we have a tendency as social workers to make excuses as to why we don't do it. And I would just say to you, some of the excuses do not make a lot of sense. And I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to introduce the speaker. I'm okay with that. Yes, and I said I was involved for 30 years in the political process. But let me just say that, and we make excuses. You know, and I've had the opportunity now to follow some of these excuses. You know, I'm telling you that there was a lady that was on the phone, and of course she's ironing, and of course the phone rings, and instead of her putting the phone to her ear, she put the hot iron to her ear. And then, you know, just don't like to take responsibility. So anyway, she goes to the doctor. And the doctor said, what happened? She said, well, I was ironing and the phone rang, and instead of me putting the phone to my ear, I put the hot iron. So the doctor looked at the other side and said, my goodness, you got a bird over here, what happened? She said, the dummy called back. So we make excuses sometimes, you know, and when you stop and you analyze them, they don't make a lot of sense. And I tell you, the other one that I really, the piece of experience that I had when I was teaching, I never forget that this is in elementary school, and this lady brought her son into the class. School started at 8:15. She brought her son to the class at 10:15 and gave me a note with a big smile on her face. She says, Mr. Towns, please excuse Johnny's lateness. 8:15 came sooner than I had expected. So these are excuses that sometimes you make, you know, and they don't make a lot of sense. So I was so excited about the fact that, you know, we are now beginning to talk more and more about involvement. You don't have to be involved at the national level. Be involved at the local level. You can be involved in the school board. You can be involved in the city council. You can be involved in the state legislature. You just can be involved. Because let me say this to you without any reservation or hesitation. You are more qualified to do the job that we're asked to do than anybody else. Social work, the training, the background, to do this job. This person, first of all, she looks young, but she's been around a long time. She served under 4 different presidents. And I had an opportunity on one occasion to talk to one of the presidents who knew her very well, said that, you know, when a lot of dumb questions are asked, you know, within the press conference, he said he returned to April because April always had a very important question that made sense and that would pull people back in terms on the track that they should be on. And he said, so and when things would get too crazy, he would reach out and then he would point to April and have her to raise the question. You know, so I can go on and on. I can tell you things that you already know. You know, she has a book out. You can see that in terms of getting 2 books out. 2 books out. You know, I can tell you that she's a graduate of Morgan State and all of that. But I figured if I do that, you might applaud. And you applaud. But the point is that it's a person that's committed to making a difference in the lives of people. And I think that is crucial. And let me just say this, and I'm gonna sit down. She doesn't believe in artificial facts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Towns. He's still my congressman. I'm gonna tell you why he's still my congressman, because he's my cousin. So family keeps family. It's true, it's true. We are related. You can see the cheekbones. From way down south in North Carolina, small community, they put us some good stuff. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, we need to have some fire, you know, because we are in times such as this. Never say more. But what I will tell you, I am so thrilled to be here with Congressman Towns. In this project that is an outgrowth of his work as a social worker, and I'm thankful for the Congressional Research Institute for Social Work and Policy for inviting me today. And one of the reasons why I'm really happy to be here is in my walk as a White House correspondent, as a journalist, I talked to a lot of people. And like Congressman said, you know, people need help. People are hurting out there. And I talk to people like judges. I feel like, you know, they say, I feel like a social worker from the bench. You know, I hear from so many different people who tell me that they're here to help people. And then look at this, a time such as this. We are now in the post-Obama era. What does that look like? It looks like a time when there's a controversy over what Obamacare did and now what Trumpcare could possibly do. There are issues of social justice, there are issues on criminal justice, and who stands for those people? Who are advocates but the social? So you are very important today. You were important yesterday, but more so today. This on International Women's Day. I'm going to be wearing red. And I'll tell you this, the congressman is awesome. Yeah, he's a social worker, but you know, he's a preacher too, so he's got stories. He's got a lot of stories, but I thank you guys. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you for inviting me. So I want to go right to this point. And then before I go to that point, I want to say something too. And this is the time of activism. We're talking about civic engagement, and where civic engagement and social work meet. I'm going to give you a story, a true story. A couple of weeks ago, I was in New York, and Harry Belafonte said, "Come over to my house with the boo." Harry Belafonte was day on there. And I ain't gonna tell him, he still got it. So Harry Belafonte, you know, this was right after the election, and this is a political. This is not a political piece. This is where the spirit lies. Okay. So Harry Belafonte and I were talking. I said, Mr. Belafonte, I said, I'm talking to so many different people. I said, I look on Facebook right after the election, 4 in the morning. I saw Kristie there. Some of you are still probably in the fear position, not telling anybody. So Chris Darden, former O.J. Simpson prosecutor, was a friend of mine who's on Facebook. He said, "Oh, the clown, the village clown is now out in the East Class. I said, "Oh, trouble." Black Republican, but he also said this is a time of activism. Then you hear Bob Johnson, the former head of BET, say, "We must find common ground." And then in all of this mosh of words, I'm still looking because people are still hurting. And people are trying to figure out where are we going and what's going to happen with this if this happens there. So I asked Kwesi Nkrumah, the former head of the NAACP, congressman, and he says both men are right, we're at a crossroads. So then I said, I'm still confused. So I asked Eric Belafonte, what do you think? He said, this is the greatest time. I was like, what? He said, this is the greatest time. He said, when he walked with Robeson, Paul Robeson, Dr. King, and W.E. Du Bois, he said, Du Bois told him this. He said, when there's great pain, and people feel that they take rock off, it is the time for radical activism.
Yes.
There's great change. So that is why you are here in these seats today. And with that, Jason Green, I'm going to you. You're welcome.
Thank you, April. I appreciate it. And as I look at this panel, I know one of these panels is not like the other. I mean, I'm not a doctor. We have a lot of doctors. But I'm honored just the same to be here with the former congressman and just a loving Congress. Thank you for all you've done so that we're here, and for our moderator, esteemed moderator. Thank you, Chris, for having me. Forgive me if I'm drinking a lot of water or someone with the words. I'm just getting the flu. I was worried I wouldn't be able to be with you. I'm honored to be here. This Ryan just talked a little bit about activism. We heard about some of the statistics and the data, where we are. I think one of the things that's really exciting about this time is that our activism has the opportunity to take many different shapes and forms. If we're just thinking about how we register people to vote, whether or not they're going to turn out, we miss the opportunity. Many individuals participated in the Women's March. Many individuals participating today in the day that women will not win. I'm fired in my heart, and I'm blind, and there's solidarity there. But there's a whole lot of other activities that are going on. And I want to give you just a little bit of background about some of my work and how I'm going to respond to some questions today to the role that I'm asked to play. So I was the National Voter Registration Director for the 2008 Obama campaign. So we can talk about voter registration strategy, but the important takeaway from that experience is that we weren't just trying to register people to vote. We were trying to connect with people where they were to build community, local level, community neighborhood groups, so they were invested in one another, invested in one another's outcomes. And so when it came time to vote, they were prepared to vote. But beyond voting day, there was neighborhood and community connections that could last. I served for a number of years in the Obama administration, but post that, I started a few organizations I think that are relevant to this conversation. The first is a documentary called The Infiltrate Project. That's a film focusing exclusively on the unlikely merger of three racially segregated churches. Three racially segregated churches in the 1800s. These were the descendants of former slaves and former slave owners that unexpectedly merged their congregations into one in 1968 in the wake of Martin Luther King's assassination to be this demonstration of hope and optimism in an otherwise divisive time. Does that sound familiar at all? Does anyone know about some divided times? So what's remarkable about that project and that story is that there's a number of young people, 17, 18, 16-year-olds who are participating in it, and this is their first connection to this idea of community. They're learning different principles about what's in their neighborhoods through film. So we're taking a different approach. I've tricked them. They want to participate in documentary, and instead we talk about their community. I started a company called Skill Smart. This is a company whose sole mission is to empower individuals and community through jobs. So one of the challenges that we see often is that people don't have the skill sets that they need for jobs in their community and don't have the laws. So we help them identify those skill sets from their breadth of their background. I don't care if you learned that skill in a formal setting, you got paid to do it, or an informal setting when you were an usher in your religious institution. That's a skill set that deserves to be valued and demonstrated in the workforce. And so we help them bring those skills to the table, match the jobs, and then when they're not qualified, we actually do appropriate training. So again, building that community so that they're being served on their immediate needs, right? This is hierarchy of needs so that they can then participate fully. And then lastly is an organization called the Arena Summit. This is the newest effort. This was spurred just after the election, where a number of my former campaign and White House colleagues, we felt spurred along by the outcome of the election. And really the discourse of the campaign, frankly. And we realized that for our constitutional society to be strong, we need to have strong candidates in the arena. We need to have strong political participation. And we realized that across the country, there are people who just felt disconnected. They didn't know where to go or how to engage. And so we started the Arena Summit, which has summits across the country in communities where parties haven't really spent a whole lot of time. We had our first summit weeks after the election in Nashville, Tennessee. We're going to have our second summit at the end of this month in Raleigh, North Carolina. We'll be in Detroit. We'll be in Las Vegas. We're going to communities that need to be enriched. And what we saw when we sat down with some local communities and the people that are attending these summits is that we wanted people who had integrity. We wanted people who had understanding of community nonprofits, who had awareness and propensity for social justice, who could not only speak to people and explain to them their consequence in this space, but also their consequence to their neighbors' outcomes in this space. And so what we realized, and what I'm really taking away from just the introduction, is that in addition to being engaged in politics, social workers should run for office. Important one that we should stop focusing simply on national elections every 4 years, but to this idea of reaching people where they are, and social workers that move people in this space, and through their elections, through their campaigns, through their candidacy, will motivate others to get involved. Now, the question that always comes is how and why and when and what. There's a phrase that our moderator knows very well about this town, and that is that we can suffer from paralysis by analysis. The most important step is doing something. And the question of whom is you, the answer to that question is you, and the time really is now. We have this movement of activism where people want to get engaged, people want to bring their resources to the table and support. So we really can't worry just about whether or not people are going to register to vote. We, at the same time, have to be just as active and vigilant about whether those voting rights are going to exist. Right? We have to meet those challenges where we face them. And I think part of that is stepping into this arena and being truly participatory.
Social work is needed on almost every level of society, it's not just everything. And we're going to go back to Kristie Holmes about social work this time.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see familiar faces out there. And I think every time you get into my I can't sweat every time. I've done this a few times, but it still makes me nervous, even when it's a friendly crowd. I ran for office and I lost. It was the best thing I ever did. I went big. I ran for Henry Waxman's seat. I hadn't done anything in politics before. It came from teaching a class that was honestly really boring curriculum. And at the top was, why don't you do it? You're graduate students, you're old enough, the requirements are pretty short. Come on, let's go. And they were like, yeah, you go do it. I was like, well, I don't want to do it. You go do it. And that's how that started. So I said, well, I'll go to the first meeting and see what happens. And there were 25 of us. So I went into it going, well, only one person can win, 25 are going to lose. And that's probably going to be me, so that's good. Okay. So I just went, and I thought I would go for the first couple of minutes to see how it goes. Because, you know, teaching and doing are two different things. So I just kept going. It was one of those things that didn't mean for it to keep going, but then I got into the loop, and then they were 15, and just kept going. And it was a really good time. I learned stuff that I probably didn't want to learn. I learned a lot about money in politics. I learned a lot about support, about endorsements, and the thing, it's just a lot about money. There's a whole lot about money. So you can care a whole lot that doesn't do anything, but you got to find out where your support and influence is. So I don't regret doing that for a minute. I'm not sure I actually wanted the job. I remember at one point talking to Ted Lewis, the one who eventually won the seat, and we were sitting there waiting for debate to start, and I said, you know, I figure you're gonna win, but if you don't win, what are you gonna do? Because you gotta give up your state seat to run. So if he lost, he lost. And he said, oh, I'll be fine, I'll just go back to the private sector. And I go, wow, that's really interesting. He's like, I can make a difference too, as we all can. And I like that attitude because, he's doing a great job. I can't be more happy not to be with the position, but that means you just have to get out there. And I've got a lot of questions that I think honestly more sexist than social workers as far as being qualified to run. I got more, where are your children? So if your children are around, don't you have a nanny? And if you have your children not around, who watches your children? You have to see your children, you must be busy. And none of my male counterparts got that. So, and also about qualifications. When it came to the women who were running, we got questions about, honey, why didn't you run for the school board first? And they didn't ask any of the men with the same set of qualifications. So those are the sorts of things that, they can be annoying, but who cares? Just move on. And you can also make jokes like, well, he didn't either. I have more than he does. But humor helps. Just keep going. One of the other things I noticed you guys were talking about reminding me of the silo conversation, and I'm going to use the word silos, but working in different areas where everybody's doing kind of the same thing, but not talking to each other. And I do UN work, and so we've had the Millennium Development Goals now, Sustainable Development Goals for quite a while, and we have our 12 problems in social work, and they're very similar, but I wish we cross over more. So we can do it in really small ways, even when we're having online conversation with hashtags, global goals with macro SW or something like that, so people can see outside of our discipline that we're working on the same things too. And there aren't many social workers at the UN. It took 6 years, I think, before I met one. And when I was there, they said, oh, so nice to have you. That makes sense you're here, but we don't have to see social workers. And so there's a lot of places for us that we're not right now, and I don't think a lot of our programs are opening the doors there as much as we can. So I think we have a little bit of work to do there. We talked about millennials early on, but I just want to remind everybody, millennials are pushing 40 right now, so there is a much younger generation we need to reach out to. And Generation Z is, teenagers. And right now, just a little example, the night before the election, my son right here, Phoenix, who's red, he's 10. He was at 9 at the time. It was very funny. He and all of his friends, I don't remember being interested in politics, but they were all very into this. And I think that's one of the upsides of this whole divisiveness, because the kids were hearing it at home. And so they all had their opinions. And he was talking about who was canvassing for Bernie and who was canvassing for Hillary. And it's like, this is a really weird conversation about a 9-year-old. But he was emotionally invested. The night before, he started making calls for Hillary. He had decided to watch all the debates, and he had what teams were like, okay, I'm Republicans, and who was, why don't we have more on Democrat? And he just saw from a really basic point of view and how people talk to each other, bullying, lying, certain things that were coming up that he just noticed from a 9-year-old perspective. But one thing I realized I should have done a long time ago was one of my old projects was working on a paper sheet campaign with a teenager named Rowan Blanchard. She was on Girl Meets World, and now she's turned into a little feminist icon. But she's got about 5 million followers. And so the night for the election, I thought I should have called her. And so we were trying to cover one of the states for Hillary for getting the vote out. So I called her, and I set up a hangout online so we could sign people up real quick to make calls. And so we covered an entire state in the next 2 hours. And so part of what we need to know as social workers is who we know and who can help influence things. So we got 320 teenagers on the phone doing a get out the vote the night before the election, but we could have been doing something like that all along. So, and they're more enthusiastic than girls. So just a couple of things. Let's see. Oh, one of the things I make my students do, which they probably don't appreciate very much, but they thank me later. Especially on the online classes. During this semester, I've really been stressing, we talk about these things in policy class and their eyes glaze over a lot of times. But you have to be able to call. So you can't say, come on, clients, come on, community, call about this thing, call about that thing, healthcare. And then we won't do it ourselves. And we say, oh, I can do phone calls, I'll tweet, I'll do the email, the online petitions, which online petitions are practically trash anymore, nobody really pays attention. So you gotta actually pick up the phone. So I make them call right now. And I'm going to watch you ever put your phone on mute, and I make them all call. And also the other thing I'm pointing, you have to give some kind of list to them. There's lots of issues, but if you're not politically active, they're not sitting in your head like they are in ours. So, you can give them a few things to call about. I don't care if you call for against, or just call your congressperson and thank them for doing a great job because you're representing well. You gotta pick up the phone and talk to somebody. So they do that, then it makes a huge difference. All of a sudden, they've called every week for the last 6 or 7 weeks on their own. So just making them do that first time is important. Talking about it is not the same. Once you do it, it's easier. The other thing that we have to do along with that is translating for communities. So we talk about all these things again, our jargon and language, and especially when it comes to the healthcare stuff. Now I care about healthcare for those of you that know I had a really big medical incident last year. Barely made it, but I'm here. But I had good insurance. I'm pretty sure if I didn't have good insurance, I'd be dead. So if these things went through and lifetime tax happened, so I'm all passionate about this now because I know what it feels like to sit there and go and see the people in the hospital who don't get it. Or to the nurses say, yeah, you know what happened there? That they didn't get approved for a transplant. I was like, okay, so people that get this letter and say you're approved for transplant, I got that it was supposed to be good news. Other people get the one that says you're not. And it's like, crickets, why would I get it and somebody else didn't? So there my social work stuff was getting really stressed out in the hospital. I had to give them some pills for that. Because I was getting very upset calling everybody in there saying, well, how does this work? Who do you call? I'm like, calm down and then I see you. I'm like, yeah, but I just don't understand how someone can get turned down for the same thing that I can get. And that's what we're happening. So find the thing that drives you. This wasn't my thing a year ago. We were thinking about these things. But right now, healthcare should drive everybody because that might be a thing. So anyway, I think I covered my points. I was trying to not recover what everybody else did. Yeah. But thank you so much for having me.
You said something very important. You said, you talked about children, I have a 14-year-old and a 9-year-old. How many of your kids? My kids are like yours. They were so involved in the election process. And I think part of the problem and the greatness is the device. I remember as a kid, my mother would never put $200, $300, anything in my hand. But they are so connected to the world now, and they see what's going on today in 2017 because of the advances in technology. It makes us more engaged. Whereas again, social work, activism. But you know, this isn't a new thing. Activism is not a new thing. And keeping in the spirit of international diplomacy, I'm gonna go way back in history. There was a woman who said she freed the thousands of slaves. She could have freed thousands more than only gave slaves. She was addressing the disease at the time. That's Harriet Tubman. She was someone who's social worker. She moved them from the south to the north. There's everybody that's moving them. That's social work, that's activism.
Yes.
Then you think about it. What's wrong with them?
Somebody said she was a travel agent.
Let's go, and it's on the line too, okay? But he did apologize. You're not gonna actually apologize. But let's even go to 1972, to Shirley Chisholm.
Yes.
Let's go to the
Yes.
first black woman who ran for president.
Yes.
Congressman Towns' mentor. She said, if there's not a seat at the table, we're a vote.
Yes.
So that's saying I need to be in the process, active. So with all this history of not even, before Shirley Chisholm, when, Harriet Tubman started moving people because of disease, they didn't call it social work, but they didn't call it activism. It's about disease in the spirit. So with all of this knowledge about the disease in the spirit from years ago and bringing it forward to today, March 2017, Dr. Ryan, how do we view today activism and social work? And I'm asking each one of the panelists that put down the line, what is the process? How do we function today with activism and civic engagement? What should we do?
So, we talked a little bit about what it looks like at the academic level, right? In the curriculum, and how do we get our students more involved? And one of the downside of those devices is that young people have access to so much information, but they need help making sense of it. I've spoken to my classes, I work with undergrads at NYU, and they talk about shutting down because it's just too much, like not knowing where to start. Okay, so let's not assume that because people have access to the information, they know how to organize it and then what steps to take.
And let's, and I'm gonna give a caveat to that, and make sure it's not fake news. Look at the source. Look at the seriously, you're absolutely right, because it's a bombardment of information, you're absolutely right. And some of the headlines are crazy, and you have to look at where it's coming from. Credible sources, go ahead.
Same time, we know that there's this tremendous power in social media. And I think that's a power we haven't yet figured out how to leverage enough, as powerful as, I always use the example of the ice bucket challenge, when people would just run around dumping buckets on Sundays, right? It's not even sure if they knew why they were doing that, but, it caught on like wildfire. So I looked at that and I thought, wow, this is a community organizing tool, right? We're not using it in that way enough, but it's something we could, if we can get people across the country dumping buckets about something, right? Which is without a real tangible result. What could we do with that medium to get people to get involved locally, to even to spread the information about taking all of these issues that are out there and communicate to folks, pick one, pick two that really are important to you, close to your heart, and go, right? Here are places you can call to find out, here's a website you can look up to get more information about how to do that. So there is a need for us to get back to our organizing, to think about how are we going to organize people? They are fired up, they're in distress, they're ready. They're kind of like, I'm ready to go. Where am I going? What is step number one? And so I think that's our challenge, that's one of our key challenges as social workers, which is to help the people we serve figure out how to make sense of this morass of information and challenges that we face, and to break it down into what's step one, what's step two, help them partialize it in a way that it's digestible and they can actually begin to take some concrete steps. I think the other key thing for us as a profession is that we do need to occupy territory. We need, in addition to wherever we already work as social workers, whatever it is we do, recognizing that leadership is not just about the person who's got the formal office, or has the title, or has the letters after the name. Leadership is about pursuing a goal. It's not the role per se. And we conflate those things. I think leadership is the person who's got the official responsibility. Okay? But we are living in a time where like we have people who have the title, they have the role, but they're not exercising leadership. So we must. So in whatever we're doing right now, whatever organizations we're serving, how are we taking steps to organize the problem, conceptualize it in ways that people can understand, and to direct, to help direct, and how we harnessing that energy. We talked a little bit about running for office. I can certainly understand in these times why folks wouldn't want to run for office, right? Any more than you want to just be under a microscope all the time. But we do need to occupy roles that we don't traditionally occupy. We've gotten a little bit comfortable with our success as a profession. And I feel like that might be a controversial thing to say, but we have gotten a little comfortable. And we need to get out of our comfort zones. And in addition to whatever we're doing to make a living, we have to do these things that we're saying we need everyone else to do. We want our students, I ask all our students, do you know who your elected representative is yours, based on where you live, who are your elected officials? They don't know, so we start there. Your homework is, you're gonna do some research, you're gonna find out who your elected representatives are. Then you're going to either email them, write them, call them, you're gonna make contact with them. We don't teach civics in schools anymore, okay? And that has served some people well. Part of why we are where we are. But bringing back civic education for us to use our relationships with people to inform them and inspire them to take those actions is something that we can definitely do.
Dr. Brown, you made a very good point on a lot of these pieces, but there's one thing. How many of you remember the Ice Bucket Challenge? There was a dollar amount limited to go to a charity and a cause. Do you remember the cause?
Yes.
Because a lot of people forgot that and they weren't getting to it, they were just doing it, it was on viral. So, yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I want to go to, Dr. Pritzker. Talk to me about what you think in 2017, civic engagement and social work should look like. And before you do that, if you have questions, please line up at the microphone so we will start answering questions very soon.
Well, first I want to talk about everything that Linda said and kind of reinforce the need for us social workers across the board to engage in activism, running for office, all of that. But I want to go kind of to some things that I think, speaking particularly from the teaching hat, but also the Texas context. So first of all, we need to truly bring policy alive for our students, for social workers. That policy is not separate from clinical social work. All social work is political, and in order to help our clients, this is an integral way of policy. Politics is an integral way of how we help our clients. Something I do the first day of foundation policy every semester is I pull up section 6 of the Code of Ethics, right? And I put up the language that specifically talks about our ethical principles regarding clinical action, and bold this, and we talk about it in say. First of all, how many of you knew this was what you were getting into? And about 2 students, 30, will raise their hands, right? And when we talk about this, and we set the stage from day one, that everything you are about to learn in the rest of your program, everything you are about to do in the rest of your career, involves and incorporates political action, that this is integral to this. And I think we need to be clearer about this. I mentioned before the research with field directors where students said this is getting in the way of my practice. I don't want to see us doing that. Social work civic engagement has to go hand in hand. This isn't getting in the way of clinical practice. This is essential to clinical practice and helping our clients. The second thing that I want to emphasize is something that this relates to from the Texas context of the report. I think one of the things that we really struggle with as social workers, in terms of how we engage, is that we're often not open to finding common ground with folks that share different values. We're not so good about the engaging with political diversity as much as we are maybe around some other areas of diversity. One of the things I mentioned, I run this legislative internship program. When I send my students out there, one of the first things we talk about is how scared they are to talk to anyone. They're literally scared. I send them to networking events and they write on these personal reflections, each of them separately. I didn't want to talk to anybody in the room because I don't know how to talk to people I disagree with. What we've seen in Texas is you have to, in a state where there are not enough Democrats to influence policy at all, you've got to find people that you can find common ground with. You don't have to agree with everything they're doing, but you've got to find something. So yesterday, the Texas Senate heard 20 hours of testimony on the bathroom bill that's being proposed in Texas that's mandating people to use the bathroom matching their bathroom. Passed 8-1 out of the Senate committee to do it. So, right, you go in there and you think, this doesn't matter what I do. This is going to become law in Texas. I'm going to tell you what. Now that bill is going to go to the floor of the Senate, it's going to pass. It's going to go to the House. Our Republican Speaker of the House does not want this bill to go forward. He is going to find a way to kill that bill. That is an ally with the Republican Speaker of the House. Last week, there was a bill, there is a major reform to kinship care, to expand kinship care supports for family caregivers in the foster care system. Major reform going on, very bipartisan reform. And a Republican member of the House proposed an amendment that would deny kinship support to families with undocumented members. Democrats and Republican legislators worked together to kill that amendment because they didn't want to undermine support for kinship care, increase support for kids, for family members caring for children in the state. That is examples of Republicans and Democrats being important partners working together. And I feel like a lot of times in our we really struggle with this. We struggle with where we can find common ground and work forward, and we have to do it when there's unified one party people. We have to be able to work with folks across different. And the third thing that I want to emphasize is I think it is great that we are seeing a resurgence of activism. It's great that we're seeing, and I hope we continue to see a lot more civic engagement. But we also, in order to truly influence policy, we need to have more attention to strategy. We really need to make sure that we are training our students not just to make those phone calls and write those letters, but to really think big picture on how to think strategically about advocacy, to take leadership roles in helping others to do so. One of my favorite stories out of Texas is one of our alums is executive director of the Abortion Rights Fund, the Low Fund in Texas. And during the interims, Texas meets every other year for 5 months, the legislative session, so there's the interims, the time in between. She and her board members went to go get concealed handgun licenses. They went to the gun range of the train. These are not folks who had ever done this before, right? 30 years, they don't have to have gun permits. Why did they do that? Because of the Texas legislature, there's a separate line you can go in if you have a concealed handgun. And you get in faster. And they wanted to make sure when there were bills coming before the legislature, and the legislature was going to act quickly, because they often do that. Oh, here it goes, let's go. They wanted to make sure they could run into the Capitol and be there to testify. That was thinking ahead, making sure they weren't just there when they heard the bill was coming, but that they were thinking ahead of time. How can we most strategically make sure we are there when we need to be there? And so I obviously want to see this resurgence in activism, but I want to pair it with educating, particularly our students who are in macro concentration, going to be policy practitioners, making sure they are thinking about strategy, and really thinking about how do we make sure we're really going to make a difference, not just being part of a lot of active voices, but really being able to make a difference in policy.
All right, that's good, thank you. And let's go to Jason. Jason, what does it look like today? Crossroads between activism and social.
Well, I think, so you already heard my clear run for office, and I'll come back to that sort of when we wrap up. I think it's something we actually should do. But picking up on Dr. Krister's point about sort of this idea of strategy, I think what is so important, whether it's in an elected capacity, or appointed capacity, or a heightened political engagement capacity, is that we show up. There has to be intentionality around that point. We can cut the 2016 election a whole lot of different ways. One of the challenges was that we didn't show up and fight it. And these issues, these communities, these ideologies are worth fighting for. And the conversation that Dr. Fisher was just talking about, this conversation amongst an ideological divide, you don't disagree with people, you disagree with ideas. And so it's fundamentally important that you be there to be a countermeasure to those ideas. And what we find is that it's those personal connections. It's knowing that someone had a healthcare challenge. That's what moves me about this idea, this issue. It's knowing someone in a family or a loved one that is LGBT that's going to move that issue. It's those personal connections. It's those personal memories, it's personal stories. And so we can't assume for a second that the outcome is already predetermined. It's essential that we participate. It's essential that we engage. Because we also don't know who you might inspire with your story. And so as you teach, as you engage in academy and on the clinical side, I'm reminded a little bit of history. I'm reminded of a woman in Montgomery, Alabama, in March, in this month, 1955, who was one of the inspirations for the bus boycott. Now, who do you think I'm talking about? I'm talking about Claudette Colvin.
Yes.
Right? So those in the room who know Claudette Colvin's story, a few weeks before Rosa Parks was arrested, Claudette Colvin, who was 15 years old, was inspired by the story she heard in her civics class that day. Because someone thought it necessary in a divided country, where these rights were not afforded to this class of people, someone still thought it important to talk about that. Still thought it important to talk about what's constitutional right. Still thought it important to talk about the role of community engagement. And she heard that message. And so that day, riding home on the bus, she said not to others. And Ms. Parks talks about that as one of her inspirations when they were being very strategic about the outcome of that bus board. She talks about that 15-year-old student, Claudia Coleman, who was inspired by her teacher to exercise her civil rights. And so I think that's so important that we don't know exactly which story is going to move someone, but we need to be intentional about the stories that you're going to carry. We're talking about being connected and not being educated. And you all have the wonderful position of being trusted purveyors of information, where you are that trusted source of information. So the activity might fall on you to understand and be that clearinghouse of what's going on out there, but then to provide that information to your students and to your community so that they can hear your words and be so inspired with your deeds. I think that that's where one of the places we need to be really active and intentional.
Well, April, first, thank you for bringing up the fake news. Part of what we have to do while we're trying to educate.
And I'm not one of them.
One of my basic points in class right now, and we have to start where we're at. I have 5 sections of students. That's who gets my advice most of the time, or my opinion, honestly. Try to hide it, but it comes out. But sometimes you just have to say, okay, stop using this, that, and the other as your reference point. I started to just wind way back, and I'll tell you all here, it's like I tell all my students, you need to be on Twitter. You really, really, really need to be on Twitter. You're like, I don't have time for Twitter. Facebook is a morass of you know what right now. So you can use that for family and friends to try to help correct messages. Right now, I'm trying to just do things where I dial back into just screenshotting Mr. Trump's tweets. So instead of sharing an article of someone that I agree with this, look at this, and it's usually headlines or all people are reading, or that first couple of lines under the headline. Show them what the man is saying. Show them what they're doing. Or it's direct from the person who's saying it. So on Twitter, people write what they think as they think it. It's not always the best way. Sometimes I write things that I probably shouldn't write when I think it. But it's coming directly from them. So rather than having an argument back and forth about interpretation, is this okay? And I've noticed the arguments have reduced greatly when I just post a screenshot of a tweet or something somebody directly said, because you can argue about the meaning, but you can see what was said. And it's really hard right now to sort through the fake news. The other part of it is on Twitter, you find reporters that you trust. I trust this person to tell me the truth. So I followed you.
Okay.
Oh, I followed you.
April G. Ryan, that's right.
Oh, I just love that scene.
Oh my goodness. We'll take a whole.
Okay, so yeah, Mike sideways. All right, so social media, there's 1 million, almost 1 million of us professional social workers in the United States, and I love it. Dan brought up the 6.04, that's what I use, and it's very bottom of our code of ethics. And I think most social workers might have seen it once in school and never look at it again, but it's not like kind of part where we're treating it as part of our ethical duty. It is part of our ethical duty. It's really clear on who we're supposed to be defending and advocating for. Everyone's listed. Everything you can think of is listed there. I'm impressed with how much is listed there. So go revisit that if you haven't and break down those bits. You can't do all of it all the time, but focus. Like I said, pick a couple of things that you care about. Discomfort is part of our code. I'll say that again. Discomfort is part of our code. If you're comfortable all the time, you're not doing the right things. Because if you're always comfortable, you think you know what you're talking about, you think everybody understands what you're talking about. So be uncomfortable in what you're doing. Yeah, it's okay to be uncomfortable most of the time, but find something that's challenging to you. Meet someone new, find out somebody else's story that you're not familiar with. It'll make you more effective as a social worker and as an advocate. All right, know your weaknesses in your group. I noticed that in some of the marches, because I love advocacy, I love marches, but you notice what happens in the news right now. The second they find somebody with any kind of weakness, they exploit only the weakness, and the story becomes about the weakness. And so know your weaknesses before you go in, so that you have something to come back with. And it's not just out there. You don't want to get discredited as soon as you got there. So make sure that your group, wherever you got it, and I'm not talking about extreme vetting, I'm just talking about Google. Just know what's out there, and it doesn't mean that the person can't lead, it just means you know what's there. And you can deal with it as you go. So it is a pretty powerful tool for good and evil. I think that's really all I have because you have covered it so well. So please, social media, please Twitter.
Yeah, and I see some of you, I'm following Twitter right now, some of you are tweeting, so please break Twitter this morning. Let's hashtag, what's a good hashtag for this morning?
Macro SW is our ongoing, it's macro social work, macro SW or social work. Yeah. We're gonna do one for this.
Okay, well, let's do something, hashtag social work. Let's just hashtag social work today.
Yeah.
Hashtag, go on Twitter right now, hashtag social work, and do you have the website?
It's on Facebook.
This is actually online right now, because we need to let people know the importance of what's being said today. And as we have the importance of today, we're talking about social media. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and Facebook, you see a lot of fake news also on Facebook. You very watch the titles and watch who it's coming from, what organization it's coming from, and also watch to see the journalist that's putting it out. Be very, very careful. And we've got a lot of issues today. Just today alone, we've got advocacy on issues of the high price of prescription drugs. Congressman Elijah Cummings finally has his meeting with the president today at 2:30. We've got ACA, that CBO did not score, that's being passed and pushed around Congress now. We've got a travel ban issue right now. So voting rights, there's so many things on the table just today. And you saw a couple of women the day after the inauguration walking around places. Just a couple of women were walking around in London, New York, DC, and size doesn't matter. People paid attention. With that, yes ma'am.
Good morning. My name is Bobo, and I'm blessed to be a baby boomer, social worker in the millennial world, and I started graduate school this year at age 61. So I'm blessed to So I grew up in the era of civil rights, so we were civic engagement and civil learning in school was so important, and I'm so sorry that we don't have that anymore. But as a social worker, I always thought that all we did was like food stamps and housing issues. But it wasn't for the University of Connecticut, I just want to shout them out, that let me know that I can be a political social worker with the passion that I have. And that's what's not being taught in historical Black colleges. I'm straight in the house. I just want you to let people understand that one of the things we need to educate people is that electoral vote. That's how Trump was able to win. We're not teaching that to our students. We're not teaching that. Even to the baby boomers do not know. So I just want us as social workers to, first of all, accurate information that we give out, become more engaged, and find out where you can make a difference. And that's what's not being taught in the schools, where we can make a difference. We're being pushed to be clinical social workers. Everybody's not a clinical, meant to be clinical. Everybody's not clinical. I'm just saying that, first of all, thank you for saying everything that's been on my heart for the last year or so. I just want to know, how can I start making a difference? I am looking forward to it too, so if you can find something that's good, I appreciate it. The public service announcements. But again, thank you so much for letting me know that I do have a role and that everything I've been saying is not false in my mind, and that we really need to push the idea of not only voter registration, but educating the correct information. So thank you so much for understanding me as a baby boomer in the millennial world. Thank you.
I'll start and let you say the substance. One of the things I think is so critical about what you're talking about is that we not think of social work just as a profession. Social work is a profession, it's a laudable, notable profession, but it's also an ideology. And when we think about that as an ideology, the core principles that we've heard discussed up here, that is no longer bounded by application. So if what you care about is positive outcomes in social justice and community, to increase integrity across the landscape, then you're not bounded by an occupation and how you deliver those outcomes. You can do that as a social worker, quote unquote, in the profession. You can do that as a teacher outside of the profession. You can do that as a film producer, as a business developer. You take those core principles, and in whatever enterprise you pursue, you're able to deliver that to the community that you're serving. And I think that's really important in the way that we teach social workers, that they should, clinical social work is the place for you, wonderful. But if you're passionate or elsewhere, that you don't leave those social work ideologies at that doorstep, you bring it with you, you're so much more effective because you bring
And I want to thank you very much for your comments, and I'm really thrilled to hear your interest in political social work. But I want to piggyback off your comment about the lack of civics education. This is very real, okay? This has been declining for a while, but I think particularly actually in the advent of No Child Left Behind, it pushed for more testing on reading, more testing on math, not on social studies. What happens in the classroom when we're not testing on it, we're not learning it. And so we've seen a real decline in what our students are learning when it comes to social studies and civics. And I think one of the things that those of us who are social work educators need to realize is our students are coming in the world without basic civics knowledge. And even when, if I teach in a graduate program, I need to realize that my students don't even have undergraduate level of civics knowledge, and this has got to be part of our responsibility to teach that, to fill that gap if we want civically engaged students. And the research is very consistent on this. In order to be politically engaged, a student, people need civic knowledge and skills. That's what civic education, civic instruction is. So we really need to be teaching our students. We kind of actually, going back to the previous question, we can't jump to how do you influence, how do you engage in activism, but we haven't taught them how systems work. If they don't know that the presidential election was decided in an electoral college and not on a popular vote, if they don't know, one of the things I'm always struck by is that, for example, I've had students literally in my classroom say, under the previous administration, there's consistently potholes on my street. Well, I called the White House to complain about this. And I said to them, President Obama does a lot of wonderful things, but just don't think he cares about your potholes. I mean, I'm sure he cares, but he's not going to do anything about it. But our students are coming in not knowing who is responsible, where do I go, who do I blame, who do I go to, who do I advocate to. So I think we really need to be mindful of the lack of civic engagement and figure out how we can better address that as we're trying to channel that into advocacy and activism.
So let me ask you this, when we talk about advocacy and activism in civics classes, and civics classes not being in schools anymore, what happens then? Do we just walk away and just say, okay, it's on the onus on the schools, or do we as parents or leaders or role models for kids take them to the polls and show them? I mean, I was a kid, when my parents went to the polls, we were behind them. This is the time you close the curtain, click the little things. I remember that. I remember hearing that curtain close, and I followed the steps of my parents. My kids are watching the news because I'm in the news and watching them morning before I get them up to go to school. So what if the schoolhouse is not doing it? Do we take it to our house? What happens there?
And I think we need to remember that a lot of parents are also not engaged and don't have that expertise to do that. So, I have 2 4-year-olds, and they're growing up around a mom who lives, eats, breathes this, right? So they have opinions about presidential candidates, and they want to know, they have lots of opinions about these things, and they're growing up with that. But not everybody has that household that has that focus, that has that knowledge. So I think that we really need to think about, maybe this is a place for social workers. If it isn't happening in the schools and it isn't happening at home, can our community organizations, are there things that we can do with, youth serving organizations and communities, for example, youth development? Can we think about how do we incorporate some of that civics in there? And there are great programs to sort of fill this gap.
Thank you. I see the tweets. Keep tweeting, keep tweeting. Next question.
I am Denise Davidson. I am assistant professor at Morgan State University.
Fair warning. Yes.
And also another graduate of another HBCU. I'm a graduate of Mass Park University. I also want to raise up the National Association of Black Social Workers. I serve as the National Relations Co-Chair. And the reason why I said that in particular is because ever since I've been a social worker for many years, we've been dealing with this identity crisis, and that's what I'm listening to. We're still trying to figure out who we are, what we do, and how we should be doing it. And to continue that conversation. If we go back historically, I was so glad to hear Shirley hear because if we go back in history, we will see that African Americans traditionally came into the field of social work around social justice. We've never lost that fight. In urban communities, in our HBCUs, we always know you have to fight the personal political fight. And so I'm always really amazed and bewildered why we still have this either or conversation and not this collective pool conversation about how are we more inclusive and how do we actually transform communities and not just patch up people and send them back into those communities. How do we actually transform them? And so as I listen to you, and Jason, that was what you asked me, so thank you again for that. I think these discussions are really important, but if we really want to make a difference, we have to start a little bit differently. Even these new grand challenges that we come up with, where is the voice of urban communities? Where is the voice of historic leadership in indigenous communities? Where is it? It's like missing. And to that point, I do want to say that at Morgan State University School of Social Work, where Dean Amifat is our leader, we have a program called the Urban Women on Line Leadership Program that was funded to actually develop women, African American women, as leaders because this should be for leadership in the field of social work and to deal with advocacy issues and to deal with political issues and to deal with this holistic way of doing social work. How can we expand this? How can we get the broader, big organizations within our social work field to take that on? Because women have more than just, we're more than just employees, everybody else is stuff. They're driven. So, I'm gonna back up.
You unpacked a lot. Yeah, some people, I think that Ryan was taking.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I've got a million things running through my head. You know, I mentioned before that I was concerned that maybe as a profession we got more uncomfortable. And that's not because we just wanted to rest on our laurels. I think we have put so much energy into trying to help people cope and navigate systems that are so broken and so oppressive. And that's taken a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of skill to do that. If we're looking at people in a ditch, right? We may have to get some food down there in the ditch. We might have to get some resources down to the ditch, but ultimately our commitment is people shouldn't be in the ditch, right? We have to pull you out of there, and we have to fight whatever systems allow that to happen in the first place. So it's a lot on us. It's a tremendous amount, but that's the call. That's the call. Social work, you know, to your point, is not just what we do, it's who we are. So that's the commitment. We also want to use the R word here, talk a little bit about race. And the fact that, you know, Blacks and Latinos
need to come together. Yes. We keep fighting there's a lot we were able to do in the 60s because there was more unity. So they're, going back to looking at what are some of those historic models, right? Where did we break some of this down and make some progress? But we do need to come together, recognizing that neither our communities are monolithic, right? Where there's tremendous, we can't say, oh, this is what it means to be black, and this is what it means to be black people. But we know on the whole, both are hurting tremendously. So what would happen if we did join forces? We've got to take some risks in doing that. There's this, think of the power we have collectively to do that.
And we have a few minutes left, and I hope she answered it after. Okay. Okay, we got 5 minutes left, we're gonna go to the next question, and then we're going to kind of wrap up, but I will say this, to your point, African Americans and our Latino brothers and sisters have some of the highest negatives in almost every category to this day. So activism, solutions, there's a need there. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Marla Harrison, and I'm Clinical Social Association. So, first of all, I am not a boomer. I am the silent generation. Social workers never stop. You remember the silent generations, we're older.
Your wisdom.
So, the reason the clinical social workers do so much of mental health work in the United States, and the reason that we're so good at it is because we're social workers and we get it. Social work is the base. And one of the things that is really, really important in the clinical association and also NASW work on is that clinical social workers are an important part of the social justice team. And what we focus on is mental health, the mental health reforms, what do those laws say, what are the details, what page, what line needs to be changed on what page in this bill. We can go into all the staffers, that's really down to it. And also, the entire criminal justice system is hugely involved in mental health. The issues of mental health are usually involved in criminal justice problems throughout. So there's a great need for clinical social workers to be involved and for social justice, non-clinical social workers to keep involving us. So I just want that message to be that clinical social workers aren't just sitting over there doing their private practice. Many of us, there's in public service and ended up maybe in private practice, maybe started in private practice, but there's a real responsibility there.
You are definitely. Thank you. And I'm gonna go to the next 2 questions really fast. One behind the other, because we're supposed to be over. And then I'm sorry, and then after that, I have books time. Activism and women.
I want to take time away from the books.
Okay, no, right there.
No, I don't really know what I want to say. My name is Kristie, and Christine Lucas. I have been a public health analyst with the government, the CDC, for a very long time, so I know data really well. More importantly, I'm a PhD student right now, in my second year, and I've been writing a lot about issues that concern me. One, transgender issues, and another, the global gag rule, which I really feel very strongly about. What I'm not doing, now I'm completely fired up to do because of you all, who believe in those I take it, is I've got to do this publicly. So I'm going to start writing certain advocacy pieces on all of these issues because I don't see social work in them. And it really disappoints me as much as I've reviewed the literature and gone through whatever I can go through. I'm not seeing social work writing in a strong, fierce voice about some of these issues. So I'm so fired up. And I just want to thank everybody for giving me certain clues.
Amen. Thank you. Come on. We're gonna get through this. Come on.
Where's my son?
You gotta activate yourself. There she goes. And then we're gonna have Jill and we're gonna close it out.
Thank you for the opportunity. opportunity, and I'll try to not take up much time. I'm just trying to formulate my question and really get to the heart of it. Thank you to all the panelists and to moderating as well. And I was really, really struck by some of your comments about the need for us to challenge ourselves, to step out of our comfort zone. I'm a clinical social worker from Boston. I spent the last 45 years working internationally, and just returned to the U.S. last fall, moved to DC 5 weeks ago. And I'm really concerned about the fraying of our social fabric, for lack of a better term, and the differences in values that I see now just within my own country. I'm going to make it start across the world, but here, and I think that as social workers, yes, there's a place and time for advocacy, for protest, for voter registration, for serving in political office, but I see a need for us to have some really hard and difficult conversations with people who do not share our values in this profession. And I don't have any responses really, but this is my question of how can I step out of my comfort zone and work with all of you to do this.
You said that to come to somebody, asking that question. Really fast.
One thing I can say directly to you, and thank you for just getting up and saying, it doesn't matter what you said, you got it. So it takes a lot of practice. And like I said at the beginning of this, my hands still sweat every time I get in front of a microphone, even though I'm in front of a microphone a lot. You just have to just keep doing it anyway. And your heart comes through, you know, like what you're wanting to say will eventually get there. And I just want to see more of us, and today crosses over really well with Women's Day, International Women's Day. And a lot of times we're apologizing for our presence sometimes, apologizing for not saying the right thing, not being quick enough, being in the way, sitting at the table. So stop saying I'm sorry so much, and just start speaking up. Your voice is just as valid. Yeah, your voice is just as valid. So wearing red sometimes helps. Today's a good day for red, so I'm looking red. It helps with empowerment. But if we stay at the rate we're at right now, females in particular, we'll stay at 17%, whether it's Congress, on boards, the rest of it, the next 100 to 500 years. So we can keep saying, oh, we're doing better. It's the most women ever in the Senate, but it's still not enough. So we've got to make bolder steps. We have to write blogs, not just try to do social work research. Research is great, but if it doesn't translate to the community, we're failing. So we do have to use our voice on Twitter. We have to use our voice on blog.
Just came up with advocates, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's it. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, yes, sir.
Good morning. Sam Loder from Southern University School of Social Work, New Orleans. And this could have happened at a more opportune time, considering that March is National Social Work Month. What struck me specifically, some comments that were made around who is a social worker and what is it that social workers do. I think for us that are in the room that are social workers, make no mistake about it. If you do not have the training, and what I mean by the training, that is a bachelor's degree in social work, an MSW degree, national social work, or PSW, PhD, you're not a social worker. And I say this often to my students because for a long time, historically, I think our profession has always been one that has been approached upon. And so I think for the record, understanding that training is what separates those who are pseudo-social workers as opposed to those who are actually trained social workers. My comment, question I should say, social workers are involved in so many different issues. What I'm interested in hearing is considering the Department of Defense, Armed Services, being a veteran itself, Operation Rocky Freedom. I wonder what the panelists would have to say in terms of the complex issues that this protracted war that we find ourselves in, how it's affected social work, and what you see as the road ahead, both academically and as advocates in this profession.
Thank you, really fast. Would like to answer.
I work with Give an Hour. Anything you can do, if you're a clinical social worker, we don't have a lot of time to volunteer, and I'm going to be more of an advocate of putting boundaries around your time. But one of the things I do care about is Give an Hour. So if you're an LCSW, you can do, say, give 2 hours a week to vets who are on the waiting list. So you can do really specific things as clinical social workers, as well as work on bills, work on things for the VA. I have a really long list if you want them, of things you can do military-wise, and USC specializes in military social work as well. So I do have resources for you afterwards, but I know we're out of time.
I was just gonna say, your question, if I may. So one last thing. Just a story struck me from my past. So when I started at the White House, our first meeting was in the Situation Room. And if you ever looked at the Situation Room, you've got, it's effectively a big conference room, conference table, chairs around the conference table.
Super secret.
And then super secret, you've seen pictures. And then there's some chairs that are around the outside of that room. So chairs directly at the table, chairs on the outside. In our first meeting, we all walked in and we sat in the seats around the outside of the table. And then the big boss came in and saw all of his appointees sitting around these seats around the outside of the table. No one seated at the table. He took his seat at the table and he looked at us and he said, "What are you waiting for? We have work to do. Take your seat at the table." And I think that that's the message for you is what are you waiting for? We have important work to do. Take your seat at the table. And you don't have to do that alone. It's not alone. You, with your colleagues, with your friends, with your family, to go back and to flush these ideas out with them. There is important work to do. There are seats at the table.
That's an amazing story. That was an amazing story. Don't sit outside at the table. I want to thank you all. This has been an education for me. This was a great panel discussion. I want to thank the Congressional Research Institute for Social Work and Policy for inviting me and hosting all this and this social work month. Thank you so much. Please, my hashtag, my handle is #AprilGRyan, and I encourage you to be involved. This is a time for a time such as this. We need to hear voices. And I thank you again, and I'm going to Charles Lewis up and right now. And I also want to thank my cousin. Former New York Congressman, right? Honorable.
Thank you so much, April. Okay, let's give our moderator another word. She's an honorary social worker, and so is Jason and Orlando. Susan. Let's give them a round. Kristie has something she wants to say in terms of how we're going to do this book signing, but we're going to ask April to sit at the table here, and then people can come here and get the books, and she will sign. Now, I want to thank everybody for coming today, this morning. I think this was a really good conversation, and this is a tradition that we're starting. We're going to be at the Press Club in our social work month. But before I close, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize someone. I want Patricia White to please stand.
Yes,
Executive Director of, let me see if I got the Fund for Social Policy and
Education
and Practice. The Fund for Social Policy, Education, and Practice, and she's the one who kind of brought this coalition for policy, education, and practice together. And I think she brought the resources for us to do this work. So I think we should definitely thank Pat for that.
also go through there. And that way you can just walk out with your receipt, get your vote. Okay? Amount of $20. I think about it. So start over here. It's a bestseller. You need this. April Ryan's book. She's an amazing moderator. We have that.
Thank you.
Thank you.